The Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. For nearly 2 decades, one man murdered at least 49 women in the Pacific Northwest, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. What's even more chilling is that he was arrested in 1998, but investigators had actually interviewed him years earlier and let him walk free. When you think about serial killers, you probably imagine some obvious monster. But Gary Ridgway lived a quiet life in Washington state, worked as a painter, and had a wife and stepson. His neighbors knew him as unremarkable, almost invisible. Yet between 1982 and 1998, he was hunting women in the shadows of Seattle and surrounding areas, specifically targeting vulnerable victims, sex workers, runaways, and women struggling with addiction. These were women society had already written off, which is exactly why he could kill for so long without getting caught. Let me take you back to the early 1980s. The Seattle area was booming economically, but poverty existed right alongside that prosperity. There were vulnerable women on the streets, and one of them was a young woman named Marcia Chapman. In 1982, she was just 21 years old, with her whole life still ahead of her. She had family who loved her, and she was involved in the escort business, which put her in a dangerous world she was trying to navigate. On August 1, 1982, Marcia disappeared near the Seattle-Tacoma airport. Her family reported her missing, desperately hoping she'd turn up. But Marcia Chapman would never come home. Around the same time, other women started vanishing. Opal Mills, Debbie Abernathy, Wendy Caulfield, the list kept growing. A pattern emerged. These were women with little to no connection to mainstream society. Most people barely noticed they were gone. That was the tragedy and the reality. In 1983, a young woman named Wendy Caulfield's remains were found in the Green River. That discovery gave the case its name and put the Seattle police on alert. This wasn't random violence. This was organized. This was calculated. By 1984, the Green River Task Force was officially established. It was one of the largest serial killer investigations in history at that point. Detectives interviewed hundreds of suspects. They pursued countless leads. The killer remained elusive, continuing to hunt through the mid-1980s while police desperately tried to stop him. During this time, Gary Ridgway was living a seemingly normal life. He was married, he went to work, he paid his bills. But on the weekends, he was driving around, looking for victims. Here's where the story gets haunting. Investigators actually had Gary Ridgway on their radar early on. In 1983, they interviewed him because he had a criminal history involving the solicitation of prostitutes. But at that time, there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. They let him go. Think about that for a moment. They had the killer in their hands, and without knowing it, they released him back onto the streets. He would continue killing for another 15 years. Hundreds of interviews were conducted. Polygraph tests were administered. But Ridgway always denied everything, and without the technology or evidence available at that time, he couldn't be prosecuted. The investigation continued through the 1980s and into the 1990s. Over 40 women were dead. The task force was working around the clock, but the case had gone cold in many people's minds. The media coverage faded. The public moved on to new stories. But the investigators never forgot. They kept files open, they kept hunting, and they kept hoping that technology would eventually catch up to the killer. And that's exactly what happened. By the mid-1990s, DNA technology had advanced significantly. In 1995, the task force decided to test DNA evidence from some of the oldest cases, including the remains of multiple victims. They compared the results to their database of suspects. Still nothing. But in 1996, they sent DNA samples to the FBI for testing with newer techniques. Time was running out for Gary Ridgway, though he didn't know it yet. The breakthrough came in September 1998. DNA evidence linked Gary Ridgway to multiple murders. Police arrested him on September 30, 1998, at the truck painting facility where he worked. He was 50 years old and had been living in the same general area the entire time, continuing his normal life while being responsible for one of the worst serial killing sprees in American history. When detectives brought him in for questioning, something unexpected happened. Gary Ridgway started talking. After years of denial, he confessed. Between November 1998 and June 2001, Ridgway made multiple confessions, providing details about his crimes to investigators. He described how he would target women on the street, gain their trust, and then strangle them. He confessed to killing at least 71 women, though the exact number may never be known. Some of those confessions occurred after he was promised he wouldn't face the death penalty if he cooperated fully and told the truth. This decision by prosecutors was controversial. Many people, including the families of victims, struggled with the idea that a man who had killed so many wouldn't face execution. But law enforcement felt they could get more answers through negotiation than through trial. In November 2003, Gary Ridgway pleaded guilty to 49 murders. He received 49 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The case was officially closed in 2002 after Ridgway had confessed to all the murders he could remember. But closure for the families was complex and incomplete. Some remains were never found. Some victims were never identified. Some families had waited decades for answers. The pain didn't end with his conviction. What this case reveals is something uncomfortable about how we treat vulnerable people in our society. The reason Ridgway was able to kill for so long is that his victims were marginalized. They were people society deemed disposable. If his victims had been wealthy, prominent members of the community, would the investigation have moved faster? Would the media coverage have been more intense? We'll never know for certain, but the pattern in serial killer cases suggests that victim selection matters. Ridgway deliberately chose women who were less likely to be missed quickly, less likely to have resources devoted to finding them. Gary Ridgway is still alive today, living out his life sentence in a Washington state prison. He's in his 80s now. He'll die behind bars, and that's where he belongs. The Green River Task Force solved the case, but it took DNA technology, 20 years, and the cooperation of a confessed murderer to finally bring justice. The victims never got that justice in real time. Their families waited for decades. And many questions remain unanswered because Ridgway's memory of his crimes wasn't perfect, and not all bodies have been found. This case stands as a reminder of the importance of taking all missing persons seriously, of not giving up on cold cases, and of treating vulnerable people in our communities with the dignity and protection they deserve. It's a reminder that monsters don't look like monsters. They look like ordinary people. They live next door. They work 9-to-5 jobs. And that's the most terrifying part of the Green River Killer story. What do you think about how this case was handled? Do you believe prosecutors made the right call by not pursuing the death penalty in exchange for confessions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.